Hi, I'm Daniel Shanahan from New Leaf Data, and I'm getting ready to launch a product on tasks. It's a task management product, and I'm getting ready to launch it up on my Gumroad site. There's a problem with it, though, is that I created it a couple of years ago, and all of the tasks, the dates are old. If I come over here and look at task, I can see that almost everything is overdue. What I want to do now is create a script that's going to update those tasks. And I thought it might be interesting to do the script in a video format to show in case people are interested in the FileMaker platform and wondering how other developers write their scripts. This could be one example. So that's what I thought I'd do. This is not a video on the product itself. I'll have a separate video for that. So here's what I want to do. I want to create a script that's going to update these tasks. If I look in here, I can see some of these tasks are old, and I want to have something a little bit more up to date. So let's take a look at that. I'm in the script workspace, and here's a couple of things that I like to do for the script workspace. This is completely, everybody does things differently. The first thing I like to do is hide this. This thing drives me nuts. I do not want to see this panel here. It just has a confining feel to me, and I want to see my script editor as much as possible. I'll even shrink this down as much as I can when I need to. I have a script already started. It's in this temp section. All of the other production scripts are on this side. In this temp section, when I start a script, I always end a script with an exit script. You don't need it. I like it though because it helps me conceptualize the end of the script. Not necessary at all, but that's how I write scripts. Lots of developers will put the information about a script here. And I used to do that for a long time too, and they'll have a bunch of stuff at the top and then start writing the script down here. I stopped doing this several years ago. What I found is that I would go into that top space and I would write modification notes to the scripts. And some scripts had quite a bit of modifications. They had essentially a log. And so what I decided to do, again, several years ago, is put all of that down here. So the way I do it now is I have a timestamp in my email address, and then I have information about the script. And if I were to come in sometime later, it could be later today or tomorrow or a year from now, the way I would handle that is I would put a dash here, and then I would put another timestamp. I have a text expander that does that quickly. And then I'd write my note. And now here I have a log that just always goes down. Okay, so that's all the setup. So now what I want to do is I want to go through the task list and update the task. So I could do this conceptually because I know the product well. I built the product, but let's take a look at it together so we could see what we're looking at. I have the way that I set things up is I have user interfaces and I have scripting or development environments. So I have that down here. It's under the data folder. It's not a data separation model. So let me just open that up and I'll close this other UI layout. And what I want to do is I want to navigate over to this layout. One of the advantages of having a separate layout for development processes is I never put a script trigger on any of these layouts. So I can go into those layouts and I could have, in fact, when I do this layout, I'm just doing this to show, but when really what I do for these layouts is as much as possible is I remove all of this and then I have it in browse mode. And that's it's I do that for to optimize the process. Okay, but I want to take a look at this data now. So I'm going to do this. So what I want to do is I want in the script, I want to navigate to this layout. I want to traverse through all of these 813 records. I want to change the start date, and I want to change the due date. The due date has to be after the start date, so I'll need to make sure of that in the script. And it would be nice if I had some completed. And so I'll have some of those completed, and we'll use a random function to get that done. So the first thing I want to do is take care of the context. So I need to go to this layout. And I want to make sure that all the records are shown. And then the last thing I want to do in this, because this is a temporary, this is a resetting of temporary data. The user is never going to run this script. So I'm not, and that's important to realize when you're writing scripts, who's going to run it and in what context. Is the server going to run it? Is a person going to run it for a report or something? I'm just running it to add data. So I don't need, so I'm okay if the database starts on a user interface and then navigates away to one of these data or developer tables. Normally, I would never have the user see this table at all. But it doesn't matter now. I say all that because now, because when I navigate to this layout, I want to make sure that I head back. So I'm going to go to the layout, go to another layout. I'll say the task list, and again, I'll show all records. I'm not sure what's going to happen in between here, so it's possible I'll be on a different record set. So I want to make sure I'm showing all records, and then I want to show a dialog that's saying that I'm all done. And that's how I do that. So that's going to tell me that all of that's done. Now I have to write the script somewhere in between here. This is how I do it. I'll put some space in there. Let's see. So what I want to do is I want to go to the top of the script and I want to loop through. So that's just a loop. So I'll do a loop. Normally, let's see. I'm going to show if I'm on the. I should go to the first record. So I'll go to the first record, and then I want to go to the next record. And exit after last. Normally I don't use this. Normally what I would do is use a variable and iterate through the variable. And the reason I don't use this is because it leaves an error on the FileMaker server log. But I'm not running this. Like I don't care. I don't care about that error log. This isn't even hosted on a server. So this is just easier. Okay, so I have to go through here. So I'm on. So once I do this, of course I want to save that. So once I do this, I'm going to come up to this first record, and then I'm going to do something in here. It's my do something section, and then I'm going to go to the next record and do the same thing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to update. I'm going to set the start date, and think how should I do that? Here's the thing. I could have the start date. Again, this is all demo data, and it would be nice to show the overdue feature. So I could set the start date as today. So I could do something like this. That's going to get the current date, and And I could do some kind of random section with that too. I could say, give me the current date. I'm walking through this in my head too. I'm going to change this. The reason I'm stumbling a little bit is because there are going to be some dates I want in the past, and I want them to be overdue so that I can demonstrate the overdue feature. But for this first pass, let's just write a random date from now until sometime in the future. That will help me. There's a process in developing, not just in FileMaker, but in JavaScript or PHP or any developing, where you would go through the code the first time, and then you would refactor the code and say, well, now that I have written the code, is there any way that I could go back and optimize it? And we'll do that here too. Okay, so I know I want some kind of random date. Let's put a random number. Let's say I want to start a project. I want to start a project between now and 30 days would be my start time. I'm going to create a random number, but I don't want a random number to be 365, so that my start date for the project would be a year from now. So let's do that. In fact, let me just call it random days, because I might use random again. And let's use the random feature. And what I want to do is okay, so that works. Let's take a look at our data viewer, and I can double check that. Looks like I've been using that for a while. Let's see. So I can click on this, and I'm getting random numbers between 1 and 30 by using the ceiling function. The random number, let me do this. The random function itself doesn't take any parameters and is simply going to return a value less than 0. It's a decimal value. And so I have all of these values, and so I need to multiply it by a whole number in order to get that whole number. Okay, so that works, and that's going to give me my start date. Okay, so now I could say random number plus start date. That's wrong. Random. It's better to do this anyways. What I like to do, it takes a little bit more time, but what I like to do is open up the variable and copy. I use a keyboard command for that. And then come down and paste it. I have it's possible to type that incorrectly, and then the code doesn't work, and I've done that before. Okay, so now I have the start date. It's going to be this random date between really tomorrow, because I didn't choose 0. I could choose 0. I could say floor. It's sort of the opposite of ceiling. Floor and 31. So that gives me 30 days, and so it's going to be between today and a month from now. It's when it's going to start. Now the end date has to be after the start date, so that's pretty simple. Now I see I do want it. Random start day is what I want to do here. I'm changing this. I just thought of something different, and then because I want to have want to have a due date, I think I call it. Yeah, due date is. So due date is going to be, again, what I should do is copy that, but I can see it, so I think I have it right. It's going to be the start date plus something. And I could put +5 or +7 and have it all constant, but I like the idea for the demo data. I think it reflects real life if it's a random number. So it might be a random number between, now and 21 days or something like that. So start date and the variable, which doesn't exist yet, random due date. Okay. So let me copy that. So random due date doesn't exist, and I'll put that up here and paste that in, random due date. And random due date now, I don't want random due date to be 0. It could be, but I don't want it to be. And it's the same thing, and I'll just say it's 21 days. So now we have a start date and a due date. The start date's going to start at least today, but anytime between now and the next 30 days. And then we're sure that the due date is going to be later than the start date. That would be a problem if the due date was prior to the start date. Okay, all of that should work. I could run the code and that would work. That would update all of my data. Now what I want to do is, and I could run it, I probably should run it. This would be a good, I'm not going to do it, but this would be a good time to run the code and check for errors. I'm not going to do it at this point because I'm not done thinking about it yet. Then what I want to do next is I want to say, what do I want to do next? I want to have a completed. I want to have some of my tasks completed. Also, I want to have my start date. I want to have some of my start dates prior to today. What I want to do is have a third of the tasks completed. Could be any number. I just think a third works well. Could be a quarter, half, could be 3/4. But I want to do a third. So in order to do that, I need to know how many tasks I have. Now I have 813. I could just work off of that number, 813. But I like the idea of having it dynamic so that as this demo file gets moved around and tasks get added or deleted, at least in the demo data, that it would always be dynamic and it'll always be a third. So to do that, we need to find out how many records I have. So we're gonna count the records. Okay, so that should give us a third. So we have a third. Now we could just do the top. The easiest thing to do would be to have the top third, but it's kind of fun going through this process. So let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say that as we loop through the records, we're going to set some of these as completed, and by the time we get through all 813, we want a third of them to have been marked completed. How do we do that? What I want to do in order to accomplish that is have another counter and periodic and see how I'm progressing through the list. So what is that number? Let's take a look at our debugger. Not our debugger, but our data viewer. And let's see, I know that 813 It's 271. So I'm looking at 271 is going to be my completed task. And okay. So now, so what I want to do is as I go through the records, I want to have some kind of question to say, do I set this in the past and make it completed? Yes or no? It's going to be a Boolean response. If the answer is yes, then I want to start counting how many I have used. And when I get to 271, I want to stop. So it is conceivable in that way that, based on this Boolean, that it would be the first 271, but I think the odds are against it. So anyways, it's like flipping a coin. I need to flip a coin at each of these. So I come to this one and I say, is this one going to be start previously and completed? Flip a coin, yes or no. Is this one? Is this one? So let's do that. We're going to do a coin flip. And there's lots of ways to do that. So what I'm going to do, let's see, I need another variable. I'm going to use a random number again. And what shall we call this variable? We'll call it completed task Boolean. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a random again. And remember, the random is a function, takes no parameters. It's going to give us a value of less than 0. I really just need one digit in that random number. And what I could do is I could say, give me the right digit of that random number. That's going to give me a digit between 0 and 9. Then what I could do is I could say, whatever that digit is, let's divide it by 2. That's not quite what I'm doing here. What I could say then is I could say divide it by 2, and what's the remainder? And if there's a remainder, that'll give us a 1. If there's no remainder, that'll give us a 0. So this is our Boolean, and let's break that apart even further. So here's our random. Let's do this. This would be even better. Let's see. I have a quick key for this. Here's our random. I want to use a let statement so that I can solidify the random, and then we can work with that same random value. If I just use random, the random function, I'm babbling. If I just use the random and then write random and then if I did this, this is what I want to do, but if I just use these, I'm going to get 3 different values for random, so it doesn't quite make sense. So I want to put it in a let statement and solidify what this random is. So we'll do that, and then we'll say I can get rid of these. And that's good for there, and now this will be oh no, I want this, sorry, this is what I want. Single digit random. Okay, so that should work. And so now what I have, oh, no, this would be helpful. That's the whole reason I did it this way. So now we could see that we're grabbing, does that work? Oh, that did not work. Oh, I did this wrong here. Yeah, for that. That's the exact reason I was trying to do it this way. Now we can see that we have a 9 on the right, and so I can pull that off. There's a 9. 9 divided by 2 is 8 with a remainder of 1. So that's how I get that Boolean. Run that through a few more times. Here's 1. So every odd number is going to give us a 1. Now we're getting a bunch of odds here. Here's 4. And so this number is just the very last number on this set. And that's what we've written with this. Okay, so that gives us a Boolean, and as we go through each one, we're going to run that Boolean and say, so now we need a conditional. With the conditionals, with the Booleans, you could do this. Here's what I want to do. Let me put this back up with the other variables. It's a little, has a little different meaning with the variables, but I'm gonna stick it up there anyways. And I usually like to have a space before my conditionals so that I see what's going on. And in fact, I'm going to start putting some notes in here. Set context. Okay, so we have some notes here. We're going to grab the variables. We're going to loop through the records. That's pretty obvious. Now we have condition completed. You could do this condition as it's going to be either 1 or 0. I like to say true. Sorry, true. So I want to know if it's true or false. And so you could do it either way. That should work. We'll take a look at that. But true and false equate to 1 and 0 in FileMaker. So now I'm going to say if that's true, if I go here and I run that random Boolean, that this one with the mod, and if that gives me a 0, in fact, let's run it the opposite way. Let's say if it's false. And I want to run it, yeah, it doesn't matter. But I want to run, in my mind, I'm thinking about it false. It's easier to do that first. So false is going to be 0, and that means that I'm going to set the date and the time as they are in this. So okay, so we're running this this coin flip. We're getting a Boolean, and we're going to say if it's 0 or if it's false. All this work we did up here to get the start date and the due date, put that in, and we're not going to have a completed date. I could run it through true first, but false is easier to conceptualize. So I did it with false. So then I could just say else. I don't need an else if. I don't want an end loop there. I can do an else and say if it's true, I want to have a completed date. So I want to set the same fields, and I want to have a completed date, and I don't have a thing for that yet. But the start date and the due date, I don't want to be in the future. I don't want them to be today or in the future. I want those dates to be in the past. And so what I need to do is then reset these variables. So I'll put those down here. That's interesting. I might not need to do that with the due date. If I change this variable here, no, I do need to do that because it is going to go in that order. Yeah, it has to be done off this. Okay. So let's put a space in there. So instead of my current date plus a random start date, and my random start date was 30, let's just say let's change the random start date as well. I'm going to change this whole side here. And so the random start date, I want that to be longer. So I'll say that's 90, and so I want that to be 90. And then when it gets here at the start date, I'm going to subtract 90 days from today. Not going to subtract 90 days. I'm going to subtract whatever that random value is, anywhere from 0. I don't want it to be 0. I want it to be at least 1. So ceiling. So it's at least yesterday or 90 days prior. So working sort of in a quarter scenario. Okay, so what do we have so far? Now it's starting to get a little bit more complex for my mind, so it would be good to start running through this. But let's see. Let me okay, a couple of notes there. Now I want the completed date, and again, a real easy thing would be to let the completed date equal the due date. But it might be kind of fun to say the completed date will be a random number somewhere around the due date. So let's say our completed date. It's also nice because, again, it gives some realistic data, and you could run a report to say how often was this completed beyond the due date. But let's not get too crazy about that. Let's say that we could have a span of 5 days. So if it took longer than we expected, it only took 5 days longer than we expected. Right away, you know I'm in a fantasy world when I'm developing and I say it's only 5 days. Okay, but let's say 5 days. So we need another random number, and we could just grab this one. my naming convention is lower camel case. Floor times 6. That will give us a 0. That means it's possible that it was due on the due date. And more than likely, though, it will be. And it's going to show us mostly being overdue, which is too bad, but we'll live with it. Okay, and let's put the completed date in there. Now, one thing you might notice is that in set field we have this calculation result, and we could perform the calculation inside the set field. I rarely do that. Again, this is developer preference, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I take this extra step of performing these calculations outside of the set field and putting them in a variable. And the advantage, for me, the advantage of that is that when I'm running through the debugger, I can look and see what the value is before it gets set, and then I can abort the script if I need to make changes. Okay, let's see what we have so far. Okay, now the other thing we need to do is we only wanted to do this for a third of the records. We don't want to do it every time. We could run up with almost half if we just relied on this coin flip here. So we want to do something here that recognizes that we're counting against this. We need to do that, and for that I'm going to need a counter. I'm probably going to need a loop in here, and I don't have it in my mind exactly how, but let's just start piecing this together. So I'll need a counter. That's going to be my counter, and I need to know how many have been completed. So of this task record count, how many of those have been completed? This is going to be a dynamic number. That's not what I'm going to do. This is going to be a dynamic number. When the first one is done, it'll say 1. When the second one is done, it will say 2. So it'll count them. And then, oh, that's what our counter is going to do. Let's see. Let me stick with this, and I'm going to say that's not right. Okay, I'm over-engineering it in my head. So I'm going to back up a little bit. We're going to refactor this code. The whole reason that I said to do this, I still agree with. I still think it's nice to have that simple condition at the top. But we need more conditions in this else. And so now, in my mind, it makes sense to put this false section in the else portion. So I'm going to do that and grab this chunk of code and put it up here. And of course, that makes this note go up here, and this should be true. Okay. So now what I want to do, if it's true, I want to start counting that. So in my loop, I'm going to put this back up here. No, sorry. No, it should go down here. Okay, I'm having a tough time conceptualizing this this counting section, and this happens. At least it happens with me. And so this is a time to get up and walk away, or take a little break. I didn't do that, but I think I figured it out. And but it happens. You just sometimes in scripting, you just have to figure all that stuff out. So what I want to do, I don't need this one, and I don't need this I need some kind of counter, and I need it to increment, and my default is always to do an I and increment the I, and then do and I is greater than if I want to exit the loop. That's right. So that was a paradigm I was working on, and that's really not what I want. What I want to say is I don't think I need that at all. And what I want to say, I could just, well, I mean, it's the same concept. Yeah, it's the same concept, but I'll just put, I'll make it easier in my mind. A completed date counter, and we'll create an if statement. Lots of people don't like if statements. Lots of people only write case statements. I like the simplicity of the if statement. You can use whichever one you want. And I'm going to do this. So if it let me write this, and then I'm going to change it. So I'm going to say if it's empty, then put a 1. Otherwise, give me this plus 1. That's how we're going to increment this. But I can optimize this even more because it's only going to be empty once. So what I could do, if I could say if not is empty, then give me this. Otherwise, give me 1. So again, it's always going to, it's only going to be empty once. So it'll come through here, and it'll evaluate this, and it'll be false, so it'll go through this. And it'll do that the first time. Every other time it's going to evaluate this as true, and then we can save time by not even reading this. How much time is that? It's milliseconds. How much time are we saving? I don't know. But it's usually considered good practice to have the condition at the top that's going to evaluate as true, so you can exit out as soon as possible. So we will do that. So I come here, data's in the past and completed because this marked as true, and then we're going to start this counter. So now we need another counter. I'm sorry, we need another condition. And we want to say if completed counter is less than oh, it's going to want me to do something. Let me put a placeholder in there. Then this number, that was our 271. If our completed counter is less than 271, then we want to go through this process. Otherwise, we want to go through that process. Now the problem I have here is that we have duplicate code. It's not awful, but let's see if there's a way that we can... What we could do to... the code itself is fine, and it'll run fine, and it's easy to read, so it's not terrible, but just as a good practice, I'm trying to not repeat myself. Don't repeat yourself. So what we could do is we could say if that Boolean is true, remember this is our coin flip up here, and this other condition is true. That's really what we want to say. Then I want to run this as completed. If either one of those is not true, so the Boolean was false, or the counter has reached 271, then it'll come down here. Okay, I think that's pretty good for now. Let me tighten this up a little bit, and we might be pretty good to run this. Now I want to do one more thing. I made a copy of the file. I only had to do one or the other. I exported the data and I made a copy. I only needed one or the other, but I'm going to, in the copy, I'm going to run through the debugger. And the advantage of having the copy is if something goes wrong, which I expect, that's why we test it through the debugger. When something goes wrong, I can go back to the original, make a change, and then still work with the same data set. Here is our script that we've been working at. I think it's good to go. I might be missing a few things, but let's run it through the debugger and see what happens. We're going to go to our layout and show all the records, and I'm just going to come over here and oops, I don't want to do that. I want to show this taskbar. You don't need to see it, but I mean, we don't really need to see it, but I like to see these numbers here as we go through the debugger. Okay, so what do we have? We have our task count is 813, which is correct. And yep, so that's good. Let's keep going. We're going to go to the first one. That's right. And we're going to do a random start day. Is 10. A random start date. So we're going to add that to our start date. Okay, so here we go. So we have the start date as 4/6. Today is the 27th of March, and so that's 10 days from today. That's our random start day. And we have a random due day, which due date should be the 4/10. So that looks good. And now we're going to toss the coin, heads or tails. We want a boolean of 0 or 1 to find out if we're going to add this as a completed task. We get 0, and so we're not going to get it as completed. So we should skip this section of code and just come right down to here. See if that happens. It does happen. That's good. Now we're going to change the start date and the due date. That changes correctly. We're going to go to the next record. We're going to expect to go down here. And we do the whole thing again. Completed. Now we did the coin toss here and we got 1, so we should go inside. Now the other thing is that our completed data counter, I just happen to think if that value is empty, it's going to be false. Let's see what happens. Oh no, it went through. Okay. What does it say? Completed data counter. Here's our task count at 271. That's interesting. I probably knew that at one time, but I didn't remember it. So so there's a null value here. And if the null value is less than any whole number, that proves true. That's interesting. I would think that I would have to declare that as a 0 for that to evaluate. But there it is. Okay, so anyways, we're inside here on this second one, and that's what we want. And now we're going to add. We don't have anything in that completed date counter. So we're going to add 1 to that, and that's going to increment possibly as high as 271. And what is this complete if, oh, you know what? Oh, I don't need this. I don't need this condition. Because I moved, I didn't do that correctly. This is why we run through the debugger. So that condition is being evaluated up here. It doesn't need to be, the condition doesn't need to be set here. That should prove true, and it does. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to clean up. I'm going to clean that up in a separate copy again. So we have our original data set, and I'll move through there. And I went pretty quick there because we know that part works. Looks like we flipped the coin again. Somewhere up here, we flip that coin here, and we get a different set, but we're not completing the record. Let's open up our completed Boolean. We get a 0 again, so we should skip over that. Oh no, I'm sorry, we got a 1. I misread that. We got a 1. So let's continue through here. And now we are resetting these variables. And this is why I do the I do these variables up here and instead of in the set field calculation, because I want to read them before I proceed. So here I'm going to do now my start date, it's different. It's in the past it's January 30th. That's right. And the due date is February 3rd. The due date is still after the start date. That's good. And the completed date is, oh, here, yep, here's something that's wrong. Our completed date is 1. Now that's what we that's right, but it's not helpful. Really what we wanted to say is that the completed date is in relation to, we want to add that to the due date. So completed date. Okay, so completed date is returning 1. So let's go back. We'll get rid of this file and we'll go back to the original file and continue to code. We're in the original file now, and this completed date is returning a 1. I don't remember now how I completed start date. Yeah, so I should probably name it something like that. So it's completed random date. And so then the completed date is that's, yeah, let me do this. So the due date plus the random date gives us the completed date. Now, it just occurred to me that might be kind of interesting to take this one level deeper and say that the completed date could be before or after the due date. The way we have it set up now, it's going to be this random number from 0 to 6. So it will never be done before the due date. But we could change that. Again, this is all this is all dummy data. It's not necessary, but it's interesting, kind of fun to figure out in the scripting context, how would we do that in the FileMaker scripting environment. So what would be helpful here is to have another coin toss, another Boolean, and to say if it's 0, it's negative, and if it's 1, it's positive, or the other way around, doesn't really matter. But we already wrote that code, so let's copy that and if I spend more time on that, I could probably think of a better name, but that works okay. And it's the same exact code. We're just trying to get a 0 or a 1. And now we could say, now we could put up a condition inside this one, and we could say, I should have done this. There's no way I'm going to remember that without making a mistake. Again, I could put a 1 or a 0. This, when I say true, it equals 1, and you don't need quotation marks around that one. So if it's true equals 1, else. And that's a pretty simple one. I could use this. Oh no. Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's do this. So now what we are saying is we're doing another coin toss. We're getting a Boolean, and we're saying if it's a 1, then take that random completed date, it's really a number, and add that to the due date. Otherwise, subtract it to the due date. That gives us a completed date, and that does that. Okay, we're good. We're ready to test this again. So I'm going to create a copy, and we'll test on the copy. Here we are in a copy again, and we know that most of this code works okay. So what I could do is I could set up a marker here, and when I run this script, I want to save all. When I run this script, I'm going to run it to the marker because we know all of this stuff beforehand worked correctly. Let's bring up our, let's see. So we did the first coin toss and we got a 1. So we are going to have a completed date. That's good. So we can get in there. And now our completed date is, now what happened? We have, let's just take a look at this. Start date now is on 2/16, okay, and the due date should be after it, 3/5. That's correct. Now this random completed date that we see right here, random completed date, is going to give us a number, 2 days. So so now we're going to find out if it's 2 days before or 2 days after. We're going to run this before or after. This is a 0, so that should say 2 days before. So now the completed date should be 3. That's right. Here's the due date, and it was completed 2 days before. That is correct. And that's what it looks like. It's the project started, the task started on this date, it was due on this date, and completed on that date. Go to the next one. That also proved true. I'm just going to go through this quickly and see what our data is over here. The start date should always be before the due date. That's true. And the completed date is a date before the due date. And so if that's true, then this due date before or after should be a 0. And it is. And let me just do a couple more. Here we skipped down to this other section, so that means that this was a 0. Let's check that out. Completed task Boolean is a 0. That's correct. And also, since we have 2 of these, we should have 2 in our counter. Let's see, that's the completed date counter should be 2. Completed date counter is 2. That's right. Let's skip through. And now we're going to get 3. And okay, good. So here its start date is due on the 4th, February 4th. It was due on February 21st, and it was completed 2 days after. So we know a couple of things. We know that the second coin toss was a 0. Is that right? So this due date before or after should be a 0 or a 1. I got that wrong. Okay, so it's a 1. And but that's okay, because I know this is different than the other ones. And that this other value is 2, random complete date. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. What I'm going to do at this point is close this down and run this. Oh, I have a, there. So now I have, it ran pretty quickly. It's on my local machine. So I could say OK, and now it could be that my dashboard is not aggregating. Oh, it's not. It's a different script. So we should take a look at that too. And let's just take a look at. So here, some of them are done. It should be about a third. So there should be no more than 271. Let's see how many out of 813. 271. Good, that's a third. I want to do one more thing though. I want to update this calculation here. So now I have to remember how I wrote this. I had to dig a little bit deeper inside here and figure out how I wrote this. It's been a while since I've been in this file. So I have a JSON element there, a JSON set element, and I'm not too concerned about that. Really what I want to know is how do I aggregate that number, and I have this aggregate folder here, and there's this script here, and I see that I have global variables, global fields that I'm presuming are in part of this, and those variables are calculated here. So I have an aggregate table. I don't remember all this. I can go back and remember, but it's been a while since I did that. But in any case, the important thing is that it's this set task by person. So I think what we need to do is once we're all done with this, we need to update those aggregates. And we could do that here. We'll just do a perform script. What is it? Set task count by person. So we could do that, and then we'll go back to task and do that. Okay. So again, we're in the copy. I'm going to, now this is going to change our data set, but so all of this is going to change, but that's okay. Let's see, I want to, is that the update task dates? And I'm just going to run this. I'm not going to run it through the debugger. I'll run that, I get all done. And then I have 0 overdue. I think that's not true either. It's theoretically possible. But let's check on that. And here's an example. Oh, oh, overdue. Oh, I see. No, overdue would be I should have cleared out these values too. That's why it's more than 271. But my overdue would mean now I won't get any overdue. Yeah, that doesn't work. I mean, it works, but it's not optimal. I want the demo file to show some tasks that are overdue. So in order to do that, I need to have some tasks that were due before today and are not completed. So how can we do that in our script? Let's go back to our original script, to our original file. Okay, the first thing we need to do in our original file, you remember we're working on that copy file so that we can keep our original data set. One of the problems with that is we made a change in the script on that copy file. It can be tricky to, you don't want to get into a situation where you're making changes in a scripts in multiple files. It's hard to keep track of all that. We have that exact same thing here. So I want to make sure, I just have to remember it, that I want to run another script. So I'm going to perform a script, and it was, here it was. Okay, so we have that. Now we also know that, and this is going to the dashboard aggregates. Have a note there. Okay, a couple of notes there. That sounds good. Now our problem, we don't really have a problem because it's all demo data, but just for the sake of this practice, our problem is that we won't have any overdue tasks, and I'd like to see some, because that's part of the task manager tracks that. So I'd like to see some of that. So let's see how we can how we could do that. So the easiest way to say we already have tasks that are being done in here. We already have tasks that are being done that, but really what we need, we really need tasks where the due date is prior to today and whose completion is not done. I think the easiest way to do that, all of this stuff works. The easiest way to do that is to just go back through. There's probably a million ways to do it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back through the list and find out all the due dates that are before today, and I'm going to, those should have been set up here, and I'm going to wipe out their completed date. Not all of them, just some of them, probably through random. Okay, so let's do that. Let's we're going to enter find mode, and we are already on the table that we want to find, and we'll set the field due date. We'll say that the due date is get current date. Do I have I use, here's the thing too, I used this function somewhere else in the code. I used get current date somewhere else up here. I used it right here. So now what FileMaker has to do is it has to evaluate that function twice. I don't think it's in this case it's not, I don't think it's a burden. It's not going to take very long, but a good practice would be to help for performance is to run, if I only have to evaluate the function once, I should do that. So let's do that. Let's create a new variable called today. Call it get current date. Now it's been evaluated up here, and now it doesn't have to evaluate down here. We could change that, and we could change this. Let me just see if I have, I don't remember, oh I did, I put it here too. I don't see it anymore, and I don't remember running it. So, okay. So that's probably good. Okay, so now let's, this section of code we're going to, oh, I don't want it in the loop. It's inside this loop. I want it after everything else is done, but I want it before the aggregates. So we'll enter find mode. We'll see we'll see what was due prior to today. We'll perform that find. We need to do a set error up here. We could do the set error down below here. There is there's a condition here, so it gets caught there. I don't think we would get tripped up on any other place. So we could bring that set error down, but I'm just going to leave it at the top. I often leave it at the top, unless I have reasons for just setting the error a certain chunk of code. So anyways, okay, so let's do this. We're going to do a perform find. Now it could be that we just don't have any data. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's always a good practice to check that. Okay, let's so we're going to perform that find. Perform find. There's a couple of ways that you could do, when you're doing a find, there's a couple of ways that you could check for errors. You could see if doing a find created an error, and you can also make sure that you have a positive found count. Sometimes I do one, sometimes I do the other, sometimes I do both. So I'm going to do a condition here. So I'll say I don't really need this error one that I put in here, but just for the sake of demonstration, I put it in here. I'm going to use found count. If found count is greater than 0, so we're in this section of code. We've repopulated all of our task data. Everything looks good. We don't have any overdue tasks, but we want some to show in the demo. So we're going to go back to those records that have a completed date, because we're going to go through all. We're going to go and find the dates due that were before today, and we're going to find those. I wonder what that gives us. Let's take a look at that. It's one of the copy versions. I pulled it out of the trash. So let's do a find. What is today? Is it 27th of March? And this is what I was trying to figure out. I couldn't quite conceptualize if they would all have a completed date, but it does. It makes sense. That's how we wrote the script. And so let's say that we have we'll say that we have 10 tasks that are overdue. I thought it'd be interesting to have a random number of overdue tasks for our demo file. And so I was thinking about this, and there's a couple of ways that we could do that. I think it would be nice that as we generate new data, the number of overdue tasks would not be the same. Just seemed like that would be interesting. So there's a couple of ways we could do that. The random function doesn't have, or we don't have a way that we could say, give me a random function between these two values. At least there's a function that doesn't come to mind easily in my mind. But there's a couple of ways we could do that. It's a little bit more work. We just have since we have a small data set, so I would say in this case, I want the overdue task. I want to have at least 7 overdue tasks, but I don't want to have more than 20. So that's pretty easy enough for me to write that out. I could create a custom function that had the values of min and max, but I don't want to spend the time doing that right now. And this was only 14 digits. So one way we could do that is in a let statement. One of the let variables would be the list of the numbers, and then the second would be a random value, a random number between 1 and 14. And then the calculation of the let would simply take that random value and go through the list and select that number. So as we run this, we could see that 16. So the random value, in fact, we could even return this, but the random value was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was 10. And this is going to give us a new number. Whoops, sorry. Got mad at me. So 3, we could see here it went through this list, and it just went through the index of 1, 2, 3. So we could write something like that. We wouldn't need that line. It's just interesting to see. Here's the 14th one, and it grabbed that one. So that's one way to do it, and that's fine. There's another way I thought of, which I thought might be kind of interesting, because the choose function isn't used all that often, and the choose function, just put it up here, requires a test, and then it selects from that test. And so if we just get rid of this, these are the results here, and I put a few more numbers in, and then we can put a test in here, and the test. So there's 19 results here. 7 to 25 is 19 digits, and we want the floor because we want 0 as an option. The choose function starts with a 0 index. That means this first place is 0 and the second place is 1, and that's how the index works. And we could evaluate this a couple of times. We could see that this floor to random is choosing a number within that confine. So that works well for us. Again, it would be nice if we had you know, a function that looked like this, and we could create that as a custom function, but this works just fine for us. So I'm going to grab that, copy that, cancel out of this, and close that. Okay, so now what I want to do is, not only do I want to make sure I have a found count of those values, but if I'm going to make that many, I want to make sure I have at least that many. So let me put that value in here too. Create some overdue tasks. Let me do overdue task count. So there's our overdue task count, and now we have a found count. Now I want to say if the found count is greater than 4. I really want to say if it's greater than 0, because I want to make sure we're working with some. I want to make sure we're working with more than our overdue task. It doesn't make any sense to go through the rest of the script if we have a found count of 2, but we want to create overdue task of 25. I don't think that's going to happen with the way we have the script set up, but it's just a safety net to put in there in that condition. Okay, so we're going to presume that everything we've seen so far tells us that that's going to be correct, and so now we can go through this condition and say we'll probably have our 271, I think was our number, and we just want to go through and clear out the completed data. So the result of this condition is going to be that we're going to set that completed date to 0. Okay, so which completed date do we want? We want 25 of them. So we want to go through a loop now of our overdue task. And here we can, this was throwing me off a little bit earlier, but we can do a loop now here. That's not what I want. Okay, so now we're inside this. So we have this condition here. Let me save that. We have this condition here, and now in the condition we're going to loop through these records and randomly clear out completed date. So we're going to loop through. We set the loop iterator at 1, and at the end of the loop here, let's see if I do this right, at the end of the loop we're going to increase that iterator by 1. So then every time we go through the loop, we're going to check that, and we're going to say, let's say that this is 11. Our value here is 11. So when we go through this 11 times, it's going to go through one more time and become 12, and it's going to come here and it's going to say 12 is greater than 11, and it will exit the loop. Okay, so that part is good, and we want to set this. But now we want to go to a random record, because we don't want all of our tasks that are going to be overdue. We don't want them all. We could do the first 11 and just loop through the first 11, but I think it'd be more interesting if we had random tasks that were overdue somewhere in the found set. Okay, so to go on a random, there's probably a number of ways to do this. What we're going to do is use the go to record, and we're going to generate. We need another random here. So let's create another variable. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to say, give us a random number. Again, the ceiling, because we don't want a 0 for the random number. And we don't know how many. What we want to do is base it on our found count. That's our variable for found count, which we grabbed up here. And we're saying that we're putting that inside the condition. Okay, so we have this random record to clear. So that tells us, but we want to do that. We want a new one every time we go through the loop. So we'll put that inside the loop. And then when we could go to record, we could say go to that. Always make sure you turn the dialog off. It's on by default, which I wish it wasn't, but always good to have that off. Let's see. So what's happening here? We're going to let's see. We want to create some overdue tasks, and we're going to choose the number of overdue tasks. And we'll enter find mode. We'll say show us all the tasks that are before today, and we should have at least 271 of those. We'll perform those. We'll check for an error, check for a found count. If the found count is greater than, so we haven't done anything, we're just doing a search, and if the found count is greater than the task we want to mark as overdue. Yep, that's right. Then we're going to go through a loop, and here's our loop, here's our iterator, and we have an exit on the loop. And then we're going to say which record here. Now we haven't run the data, so we don't have any completed dates here. But it would be run on something like this, and it would say which of these records, and it would be 271. Do we want to clear? because we don't want to just go through the top 11. And it's going to pick that one, so then it'll say go to that record, make sure the dialog's off, and then set the field for that date as 0. I'm going to some space is good and some space is too much. Hard to say. Okay, so that looks okay. I think I'm going to move that down here. Okay, so I think that looks good, and I want to check it for bugs. I'm sure there's a bug in here or two. So what I want to do again is create a copy and run it on the copy. Here we are on another copy, and that has our original data set. That's good. And we're in our temp file, and this is the section we just wrote here. So that looks good in our copy. And what I want to do is I want to step through this portion of the script so I can see how that goes. But we're pretty confident in this portion here. So I'll save that, and I will start the debugger, and then I'm just going to run it. Okay, let me pop that open, 813. So let's get our data viewer up here. We don't need these anymore. And overdue task count, what is that? 7. So we want to have 7 overdue tasks. And enter find mode. Less than today, 239, okay. And error, we don't have an error, which is what we expected. And we have a found set of 239. There it is. So if 239 of our found set is greater than 7, that should be true. And it is. Here's we set an iterator here at 1. And we're going to loop through here. Let's just come over here and double check this data. So these are all dates that are before 3/27. We're at today. I'm recording this on March 27th, 2020. And that is true. They're all before today, and they all have completed dates. And so what we want to do is we want to go through and knock out 7 records, find 7 records, and remove the completed date. And let's see. So we'll come down here for our loop. We're testing the exit condition. It's false. So now we want to find a random record to clear. So somewhere within that 239. So now let's look for that variable. That random record. What is it called? Random record to clear is record 178. Here we are at record 178 right down here, and this should be removed. There it is. We're going to increase our iterator. Now it's at 2. What's our random record now? It's number 46. And there, it's cleared out. Okay, so that looks good. We could do this 7 more times, but that looks good to me, so we'll clear that out. And of course we want to, the whole purpose of this is seeing that we have 7 overdue. That's exactly what we wanted. Yeah, that's good. That worked well on our copy version. I'm now on the main version, so I'm going to run this. I'm not going to run it in the debugger. I see that we had 799 here, so now we have 8 overdue. And that looks good. So that's the end of this session. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to reset that data, and I thought it would be interesting to do it as I scripted it to video it, to show at least how I do it, how one developer works with the FileMaker script workspace. In another video, I'll talk about this task management as a tool, and it will be available soon. Thanks for your patience. Hope it was helpful in some way. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. You can always find more information about myself and my company and my work at newleafdata.com. Thanks.